Okay, for the cap type lid, you don't have to leave a thick flange because we're going to be forming the flange out of the wall. So this can be thrown normally. This type of lid works really well with a high-shouldered form. So I'm going to start to suggest that shoulder. Press the rim. So I've got most of the form thrown, but I want to leave enough clay up here to form the flange. So what I'm going to do is begin collaring the top in a bit. I'll do a little ribbing. To tighten things up. So you notice I've got a rounded shoulder, and I've got maybe 3/4 of an inch of clay sitting up here at the top that are not really part of that curve. Now this is where I'm going to form the flange. So here's how it works. Again, the same principle here. I'm going to support the rim while I'm applying pressure to it. So I'm going to take my middle finger and my thumb and put it just below where I want that step to form. So it's kind of like I'm holding my fingers here and pushing the clay over while the fingers are stationary. I'm going to use the corner of that wooden rib and very gently start nudging the clay over. So here's what it looks like. I make a line where I want that to start. So my fingers are actually just below that line. I'm going to nudge it over a bit, and then I can also push down gently to start to form that step. See the step forming? Now I have a little chunk of clay now here at the top that I can squeeze a little bit between my fingers, my index finger and the rib. So it looks like this. Here I go, just a little gentle squeeze. See it rising up? Tune that up a little bit. Like the rim on the set-in lid, I want this flange on the cap type lid to have a slight inward slant. Again, so that when I put that lid on top there, it's got a little bit of wiggle room to sit down to find the bottom here. Also, the seat, the little step here that it's going to sit on, is not perfectly flat. I let it be just a tiny bit tipping down, and the reason for that is when I glaze up to this rim here, if I've got it perfectly level with the jar, again, I run the risk of the glaze being too close and welding it on. So if I tip it down slightly, I will create a little 1/16 of an inch opening that acts a little bit like a fire break. It'll keep the glaze from jumping over and welding. The other thing you may notice is there's a little shadow there forming at that step after I push down a bit on that step to form that flat area. Leave it alone, because when we make the lid, we're going to fit it onto the flange and then come back and trim that little edge off till it matches the jar. So in the end, here's what it's going to look like. See the little 1/16 of an inch shadow there below the lid and the jar? That's going to help keep the glaze from getting too close. And I'll trim the lid on there and make it fit really well where it transitions from lid to body. So I'm going to grab the calipers and I'm going to do an outside measurement. for this jar. I'm going to open them up and then bring them all the way down here and let them sit on that step and gently squeeze them in until they touch the flange. That's where the lid's going to be sitting. Again, don't measure up here because it'll be too small. Measure right down here where the lid's going to sit. Tighten it up a tiny bit. Check it again just to be sure it hasn't moved. And then we'll clean this up and we'll throw the lid off the hump. Okay, so let's throw the lid for the cap-type lid. I brought back the big chunk of clay. I'm going to center another chunk up here at the top. Press down. So as I mentioned, this lid is going to be thrown upside down like a little bowl. And this little bowl will have sides that slant inward. The reason for that is we want to be able to put our fingers around it to grip it if we take it off. So if it's just a bowl without that inward slant, it'll be difficult to lift off. So here's how it works. You center some clay on top, push your thumbs in, make a little donut shape there, open your thumbs out like a bowl, and you notice I've got that thick rim again. Left hand goes on the inside. Index finger is going to push in at the base again to make a little notch. So now we've got this separate ring. And then what we're going to do is this. We're going to actually let that left hand squeeze out, but we want it to push out so that the rim stays in. So see how that worked? I've got my finger on the inside and my outside finger is helping to squeeze to keep the rim in. Here again, I'm stretching that from the insides. See how that works? Stretch from the insides. I can keep that bowl shape angling inward here. So it should look something like this. You can double check with the inside caliper and see, okay, that's a little too small. But no problem, because when you're throwing off the hump, if you want more clay, you just push deeper into the chunk below. So we can push in a little bit lower here, squeeze a little more clay out to widen this. And then we'll check our measurement again. Now that's close. It's maybe a teeny bit small. That's pretty close. And again, these lids are pretty fast, pretty quick and easy to make. So it's better that you throw several and have 2 or 3 to choose from when you actually fit it onto the jar. Okay, so same technique for taking it off the wheel. I'm going to make a little notch at the base of in the middle of my thumb. And you need to leave a little bit of support right there because you want the little bowl to have some strength when you take it off. Put your wire tool into the notch, bring both ends towards you, pull one side towards you, pop it off. And we're going to put that right next to the jar so it can dry at the same rate. Let me show you one other cap-type lid that can be made. The cap-type lid offers all sorts of aesthetic possibilities. They don't have to be round ginger jar type lids. We can do something different. For example, if I push into that donut, I'm going to go a little deeper this time because it needs to be bigger. Open it out. Make the notch on the outside. Begin to squeeze that donut and then push from the inside to stretch it. Squeeze and stretch. What I can also do is play around with the angle of the outside. So if I want, for example, to have an angular lid, could do something like this. And check that measurement, it's close. Squeeze a little more out. Okay, I can live with that. Pop out the water. Your notch. Isn't this exciting? Slice it off. And so we have lid number 2 that we can fit later. So for the lids, you're going to do the same thing you do for bowls. That is, once the rim of those lids achieve leather hard, we're going to flip it over so that the bottom can start drying out. Okay, so let's move next to the flange type lid. All right, so you can have some fun with a flange type lid. The wall is just normal thickness, and because the flange is going to be on the lid itself, we can put a flange lid on virtually any open form. So I've got a form here I can play with. I'm going to use the inside measurement on the calipers, on the Lid Master. Awesome tool. So I'm measuring right at the top there where the flange is going to sit. And then next I'm going to throw the lid off the hump. Garlic press, squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Now the flange lid needs a pretty good chunk, a pretty good sized donut of clay when you're throwing it off the hump. So let this chunk of clay at the top be pretty big, like small orange or plum size. The other thing is that when we throw the flange lid, we need to leave the rim thick, just the way we did when we made the set-in type lid, because we're going to be splitting that rim to form a flange. So when I make my donut here, I'm going to let my thumbs go really deep to create a big chunk of clay here. So this is almost like a real donut in terms of size here. I'm going to open out like a bowl shape. Again, see, this is pretty thick. Left hand drops into the interior. Outside hand makes a bit of a notch at the base. And then we're going to do a couple of squeezes with this big donut. But we're going to do the same thing we did with the set-in lid. Once we get down to about a 3/8 of an inch, we're going to compress this rim. See that with my fingertip there? It's easier to see if you make it beveled. And I'm going to leave it that thick for the rest of the pole. Here we go. I'm going to keep pushing, squeezing out. Now, quick note. The width of that lid has to be a little bit bigger than the flange, right? So here's the measurement I got for the flange. So I want to leave some room to make the flange on the inside of that. The flange lid typically overhangs a bit, and you can be dramatic with how much it overhangs, or you can be more conservative in how much it hangs over, but the same idea applies, and that is you have to leave enough room on that lid to form the flange. So here's my low bowl with a thick rim. Flange lid's probably the most difficult of the three. It'll take the most practice. Okay, so here's how it works. I want you to notice this. This low bowl, has a shape that's roughly like this. So when I take my rib to push in to make that flange, I want the rib to follow that same angle of the bowl there. So if I push down too much as I'm making the flange, I'll just shear that part off. If I push too much sideways, too much horizontally, I'll shear the flange off. So I need to make sure that when I'm making that flange, that I'm moving in the direction the wall is going. Same physics apply that we used for the set-in type lid, except now we're working at an angle. So I've got my middle finger and my thumb supporting this. Index finger is going to sit right on top of the flange as it forms. I'm going to take the corner of the wooden rib and draw a line down the middle of that rim. Like that. See that? And then I'm going to start slowly working in, again, coming in at that angle, letting that flange rise up. Now, as it starts to rise up, I'm going to grab a little water on my rib and my fingers so I can compress that flange a bit. Also, notice my pinky can help here by providing a little extra support. And I'm just going to start moving in towards the center of the pot, going in that diagonal direction. And as I go, see how my index finger is sitting right on top of that flange there? So it's keeping it in check. It's making sure it's not too sharp or not too flat. So once I get in a little bit further here, I can then squeeze this new little ring right here to form the flange. So just squeeze that between the rib and my fingers. So now I can see if I'm close in terms of measurement. I'm using the outside measurement now. So it's still just a little bit big, so that means I can push that flange in a little bit further. Here we go, I'm pushing in a little more. I want that flange cork shape, just like the other lid components, so that it will drop into the jar lid. Now I've pushed that flange in pretty far, and this part of the lid is pretty wide now, so I'm going to compress this part of the lid a little bit to give it some strength. And then come back in and tune up this flange. So pay attention to the angle that you're holding this right angle of your rib to see if it's going to fit into that area there and still give you the slant that you need. Let's take a look and see if that's close. Now that's a teeny bit big. You do have some room to adjust these on the pot. So again, you don't have to be really picky about size. Get it pretty close and then throw a couple of them, and that way you'll have a spare. All right, that's pretty close. So when I put my outside measurement on there, I can see that's really close. So we can do a little bit of adjustment once this is leather hard. I can trim a teeny bit off here, or I can trim a little bit off the inside rim of the jar as well. Make a notch at the base with a little support clay there for strength. Drop your wire tool into the notch. Bring it towards you. Pull one side. Lift it off. All right, so we're going to set that near the jar. We're going to let all these jars get to leather hard, then we'll come back and we'll trim them.